Hey Fours, today in writing we are continuing to work through the writer's notebook process. Today we are planning. This is a really important part of the writer's notebook process. So you're going to use your brainstorm of all the different text types and you're going to choose one that you want to then write about and create a draft for. So you need to look at that brainstorm and choose one that you're really looking forward to writing about. We're going to be focusing on our audience, the purpose of our text, the language and vocab that we're going to use, some sentence openers, and what the structure of your text type is. So it's time to plan. I'm going to walk you through all the parts that you're going to need to include in your plan today. The first thing we need to think about is what is the purpose of your text? Depending on your text type, it is going to have a purpose that matches with it. For example, the purpose of a story is different to an article in a newspaper. Some purposes could be to entertain, to persuade, advise, analyze, argue, describe, explain, inform, or instruct. So if you're doing a newspaper article, your purpose might be to inform. If you're doing a story on the point of view of a particular character or object, your purpose might be to entertain. If you're doing a procedural text on how to do something, yours would be to instruct. And it's important that we identify the purpose before we start writing. We also need to think about the audience of the text. Writers tailor their text to their audience really carefully. They consider them in how they write sentences, what vocab they use, and the style of their writing. Also, even in the layout. If you think of a picture storybook, the audience for those sorts of books are younger children. Think about what pictures they use, what language they use. They're not going to use difficult scientific language in their stories. So identifying the audience is really important. Some audiences might be your peers or your friends, might be younger people, might be the government, families, the wider community, or professionals. Think about who your text is aimed at, who would read your text, what age group are they, and how you're going to present your text so it suits the audience. Is your audience interested in a specific topic? The other thing we need to look at is the structure and language features. You think of what we do at writing at school. When we have a new text type, for example, our response text that we've just done, we learn the text structure. So for the response, it had a context, it had a description, and it had a judgment. And we follow that text structure when we write those texts. For example, a narrative has an orientation, a complication, and a solution, whereas a procedural text has a goal, materials, and steps. Each text type has a different text structure, and you're going to need to map out your text structure and the parts and identify what you're going to put in each part. You might even map out what you would put in each paragraph if your text type includes paragraphs in it. We also need to look at the language features. So this is the language that we use, the types of speech we use. For example, a narrative uses adjectives, adverbs, speech, nouns, pronouns, action verbs, whereas a procedural text has nouns, action verbs, adverbs, third-person pronouns, descriptive words to describe action. So in your plan, you'll need to identify what language features to include. And if you're not sure, in the Padlet, I've popped a page that looks like this. It looks like this. Hopefully you'll be able to read it. It's got the text types on the side, what forms you can write in, the purpose that will help you, what the structure is, and then the language features included in your text type. Now there's 2 pages for those, so you can find your text type along the side and use that to help you. The other thing we're going to need to look at is what vocab. Depending on what topic you choose, what picture, what seed you use will depend on what vocab you're going to include in it. For example, in a text about deforestation, it might include words like logging, flooding, fire, agriculture, farming, palm oil, extinct, endangered, carbon dioxide, oxygen, just to name a few. And it's helpful to identify these words you're going to use in the text because those are powerful words that will help your authenticity of your text, which means knowing your research and the words that you're going to use. So let's have a look at an example of one that I've done. You might do something really similar to what I've done here. I've got a big page to work with. The first thing I did was I identified my audience and my purpose. Actually, that's not the first thing I did. The first thing I did was write my chosen text in the middle. I've chosen to write a persuasive against overfishing. So my audience are my peers or my colleagues, so people that are similar age to me. I want to work on persuading my friends and my colleagues about sustainable fishing. So that's my purpose, to persuade people to choose sustainable fish and to inform them about the impacts of overfishing. That's my intention for my text. The next thing I did was I looked at the structure of a persuasive text. I know that a persuasive has an introduction, some paragraphs of my arguments, and my conclusion. And I've mapped out what I'm going to include in my introduction and in my 2 paragraphs and in my conclusion. And that's going to help you when you come to drafting. The next thing I did was consider my language features. I know that really powerful persuasive texts include emotive language. They're words that make people really think about their actions. I've got words like appalling and harmful. I'm going to need connecting phrases, cause and effect phrases, and the language of opinion, e.g., I strongly believe, I ask you to consider, and it's undeniable that. The next thing I did was think about my vocab words. So I did a bit of research for this one. I thought of words that I know relate to overfishing, such as regulation, sustainable, current, inadequate, reinforce, the Marine Stewardship Council, fisheries, commercial, fishmonger, conservation, management, endangered species, extinct, and impacts. So those are words that relate to overfishing. And the last thing I did was think about what phrases I could use. These are sentences that I really want to include in my persuasive text. So I've got, our ocean is a global biodiversity hotspot. Another one, unfortunately, due to selfish commercial fishing companies, ... I urge you to reconsider where you purchase your weekly fish dinner from. And the last one, it's undeniable that at this rate, our once abundant species will become extinct. So your task today is to do exactly that. You're going to choose your text and then plan, similar to how I have, and I've dot pointed the things that you need to include. You need to upload a photo of your plan to your Class Dojo portfolio or your OneNote.